Hello and welcome back to the One Take Show podcast. In this episode, we are in conversation with two wonderful guests. We are in conversation with Ms. Neha Koshy. Ma'am is an in-house counsel at Oyo Stays Pvt Limited. And we are also in conversation with Ms. Esha Shekhar. Ma'am is an independent counsel practicing in New Delhi. And we talk about their brilliant venture, their brilliant book that is Understanding Workplace Laws for Women. And in this episode, we talk about everything, identifying those laws, understanding those laws. We also talk about what is the purpose that this book serves and how can law students, lawyers, practicing advocates, HR professionals can make the best of this book, and what was the purpose that was envisaged behind this book, what was the aim, the goal, everything. So please do join me for this inclusive, really enriching conversation. And if you like this episode, make sure you like, share, subscribe to the channel. If you have any suggestions or feedbacks, write them down in the comment section. I would love to read them. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's start the podcast.
You want something, go get it. Period.
Hello, ma'am. Welcome to the One Take Show. I am really honored to have this opportunity to speak with both of you. I think both of you bring a very unique set of experiences, and together is the genesis of a wonderful book. I'm going to read the name out of it because I do not want to mistake on this front. The name of the book is Bloomsbury: Understanding Workplace Laws for Women in India. Now, I've had some previous conversations where I've been sort of delving into this idea and understanding what are these workplace laws that operate and how to really, as a law student or perhaps as a practitioner, we can get to know them. But who better to talk about this but the two wonderful authors of the book? So thank you so much for joining me for this episode.
Thanks, Costa.
Thank you, Costa, for inviting us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. So before we start with the wonderful things that are included in this book, and I could go through the various features that are already in this, and we'll surely talk about them. My first question is that both you have different backgrounds. I think Neha ma'am works as an in-house counsel, and Esha ma'am, you have a practitioner's perspective. How did this book find its genesis? What inspired you to come about this book, take up this as a project, choose this area of law to work upon? What was the genesis of this book like?
The genesis of the book was basically, as you said, it came actually from the two diverse experiences that we both have. So I have been practicing and I have been working on workplace laws for women, especially POSH Act implementation with organizations since 2016. While I was, working and I was getting to know the nitty-gritties of how the actual compliance work goes about, uh, I and Neha have had a lot of conversations as to the reality of how organizations do implement these laws at workplace. Because Neha has come from a law firm experience as well, and she has had a client perspective as well as an in-house perspective. I have had client perspective throughout in my career practice. So once we started talking about and we started gauging our experiences together and bringing it together as to how POSH implementation takes place, how does inquiry takes place, how do ICCs are set up, how do maternity laws are considered within workplaces. That's when we started talking, we realized that how there is a gap in the market when we look into the books, as well as be it any, if you start finding information regarding specifically workplace laws for women in India, you will not find it at one place. What you will find is a lot of labor law books which contains specific sections on this. However, when we talk about the laws together, there is nothing that put it all together like that. Like, there was no commentary that brought it together, and that's when we realized that there is that gap in the in the market with respect to, and it's not just for lawyers. Like, we were not just thinking about lawyers, we were just thinking about how there is a gap in terms of even, so for example, HRs, right, human resource teams and legal teams both work together in implementing these laws at workplace, right? Now there was a gap for the human resources team also, from the perspective that they didn't have information which was easy to understand. Which is not legalese, right? You don't you can you So the point was to bring together uh, like a commentary, or bring together a handbook which combines both aspects, which combines the aspect of explaining to a layman. So let's say it could be anybody, it could be a woman who's working, it could be human resources personnel, it could be the lawyer in the organization, or just lawyers who are practicing. if they want to figure out what are the workplace laws that need to be implemented, where can they go and find it? So that was the genesis, our experience coming together and our multiple conversations that we had on this topic. That's when we realized this.
Right, right. Neha ma'am, I have the same question for
I
you.
think I'll just add in that last year we had the first lockdown in March, and Isha and I, since we were both at home, we had a fair bit of time since we didn't have to commute to work. And we always discussed how there's a serious gap in, this area of law where there are no books which clearly consolidate and clarify and, give out compliance checklists for organizations. So for that reason, we thought, let's use our time during the lockdown. Let's write this book. Let's go up and read up cases on the subject matter. They were all, time very well spent because it was all very interesting to read. And thankfully, we found publishers who were interested in publishing this content. So we wrote the book. It went through multiple rounds of edits, and then we managed to publish it. So our motivation was A, that there wasn't such a book in the market. Like Isha said, there's a gap. And B, we really wanted to use our skills as lawyers to further literature and content in this area. So that's our motivation.
Wonderful. I think Isha ma'am also pointed this out. There is a lacuna that is there in the understanding of all these laws which play a role in this interplay. And as you've very correctly pointed out, that there is not one consolidation of laws, or maybe there is a diverse sparsed out laws, may it be the labor codes or POSH Act, for example. So for anyone who's trying to gain an understanding of the same, it is difficult to actually map out what areas of laws are actually applicable in different realms. So when there was an identification of this gap that you talk about, what was your approach when you were trying to fill that gap? So were you looking at the workplace laws, for example, the laws that are only applicable to certain sectors, or was it that the laws that also govern, for example, the book very wonderfully, and I will come to that also includes the various aspects of the labor codes, which have, although not been implemented yet, are also already in the place. So what was that approach like? And I will start with Isha ma'am, and then maybe we can go on to Neha ma'am.
So the approach was basically, looking at specifically the laws which are geared towards women's safety and women welfare. So if you look at labor laws in general, you'll find that these are the two basic pillars that define or govern a working woman when they are going and when they're at the workplace, right? So from the perspective of when we looked at it, so when we look at from the safety perspective, right? So from the safety perspective, if you then start dividing the laws, you will realize that there is the prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. Then you move on to your Factories Act, which is basically now the occupational safety, which is now enshrined in the Occupational Safety Code of 2020. Now, the Factories Act again contains a lot of specific provisions with regards to women who are working in industrial establishments and factories, right? So that's second. Then you come to the State Shops and Establishment Act, because they also have specific provisions as to what are the day-to-day mechanisms that a workplace should be having at their organization, to make sure that if women are working both, like if they're working at the night time or in the daytime, what are the specific provisions that you need to have. So that's like, that's pillar number one. Pillar number two would be the welfare laws. Like when we talk about welfare, we talk about maternity benefit, like which is a right. If for a person, for a woman who's giving birth or who's due to give birth, and not just giving birth for that matter, women who are adoptive mothers and women who are surrogate mothers as well, then what are the laws with regards to that, right? So that is how we went about collating the possibility of different laws that are there, and making sure that we were covering everything that has been there in the general jurisprudence, Indian jurisprudence for that matter, and capturing that while writing the book.
Right, wonderful. And Isha ma'am, Neha ma'am, from your personal experience, was there a specific set that you recognize that these are also the areas that also need to be talked about, especially when it comes to the identification of the legislations? Because as ma'am has just said, that there are certain laws and certain codes which are there either are new or something that is not everyone is familiar with. So was there an identification on your front as well?
Yeah, so I think when we started out, when we were reaching out to our publishers, we were keen on working on laws in 5 areas, like Isha mentioned. You have your workplace safety laws, your anti-harassment laws, and then you have occupational safety for different occupations. Then you have shops and establishments governing, your time in the establishment. Then you have welfare laws, and you have the two welfare laws of maternity and equal remuneration. So we were very keen that we didn't want it to be limited to a particular audience. We wanted our book to apply. I mean, HR departments, whether in factories or in, say, brick and mortar company or a software company, any company, the HR should find this book relevant if they're employing women. So that was our target, and we wanted it. I mean, we wanted to write it in the simplest way, so that anyone with just a basic knowledge of English can understand it and can implement the steps. So that was our goal here with the book.
Wonderful. And
And
I think,
also,
yes, ma'am.
yeah. Sorry, Costa, I was just saying that one interesting thing that happened while we were putting the book together was while we were putting the book together in 2020, when we were coming up with the TOC and we were reaching out to publishers. At that point of time, the 2020 labor codes had not yet come in.
Right.
Only the code on wages had come in, and the other codes had not yet come in. So at that point of time, we were talking about the erstwhile laws. We were talking about the Maternity Benefit Act. We were talking about the Equal Remuneration Act or the Factories Act. It is only in
Yeah.
September 2020 or October 2020, if I'm not mistaken. That's when the codes, came in. So that's when we changed our we had to change our way at that point of time also, to make sure that we could incorporate those labor codes as well. And specifically, if you look at the book, you'll see that we have incorporated these labor codes specifically only with regards to women provisions, because we didn't want that they get lost in the entire gamut of all the labor laws coming together. You don't miss out on what are the women related labor provisions. So a part of the book is also dedicated to making sure that there is a comparison between the previous laws and the new code, and making sure that one understands that if X is the provision here, then what is the correlating provision in this side of it. So that was a very interesting exercise for both of us also, because we had to change our we had to navigate that change in law in between, and put that also together within this.
Right, right. And I think there is a clear identification of who the audience is, because I think Neha ma'am has also pointed out that this is not just for the lawyers or not just for the advocates, but maybe for the HR professionals and also. And this, I think, in corollary to what is pointed out in your book, and very interestingly, is that your book is a practical guide to the application of these laws. Now, this is something that I'm really curious about. So when you talk about it being a practical guide or giving the actual real life instances or giving out the real life practical scenarios as to how these laws are to be implemented, especially when you say that your audience is not just lawyers, maybe HR professionals or others, for example, how does that pan out? Maybe we can start with Neha ma'am.
So, for a practical guide, we thought, what would a compliance person or an HR professional want? An FAQ section where we can just basically capture all their possible questions that they would have. That's something that we have done. We have given compliance checklists where they can just tick off as whether they've complied or not. We have also, in our main body of each chapter, we have tried to make sure that the language is just simple. You've got the section, you've got what exactly does a section mean? How do you comply with the section? We have separated the case laws. If you're a non-lawyer, this is not important to you. So we have kept a separate section in each chapter for the case laws. So that's why we think we've made it as much as we can as a practical guide, so that more and more HR professionals, could use it in their organizations.
Right, right. I remember watching Isha ma'am's one of the webinars where she pointed out that most of these investigating bodies or maybe investigating personnels, their job is rather diverse and it's not just very limited to those specific inquiries that are made. Is it that this book also envisages that, Isha ma'am, that when it takes into account that these jobs are rather varied, there is an application of multiple laws and how facts and situations is to be assessed accordingly?
Yeah. So for example, the investigation process with regards to, for example, POSH, right? As a practitioner in this area, one of the things that I was also starting out, I realized that there is nothing in the market or there is no data that is available with regards to how to go through an investigation proceeding. So what happens is that when ICC members, when an internal complaints committee is set up, right? These are non-lawyers mostly. Like every organization, if they have a legal team, they will include one legal member, but the remaining members are mostly non-lawyers, to explain to them that what are step A to Z when you are investigating a complaint. What do you do exactly? That is not what you will find out anywhere else. Like, you will not find how to do investigations. And that's something that we have made sure that while we are covering the theory part of it, it's not just theory. It is not like a section by section breakup of the law per se, but it is the section plus the procedure as to how, like, when the law says. So if you look at the POSH Act only says inquiry. Okay, it does not define the inquiry process per se. It only says do it as per principles of natural justice. Now, for a lawyer, you do understand what does principles of natural justice mean, but for a non-lawyer, what do you tell them? Like, how do they understand that, okay, I need to hear both sides, I need to make sure that I look at all evidences, need to take a look at all the list of witnesses, I need to give them the fair right to cross-examine each other. So these are some basic things, right? So that's what we try to bring in as well, that bring in the entire, when we talk about so like Neha said, right, it is geared towards both non-lawyers and lawyers. So it's not that when we talk about non-lawyers, it's, you look at it, you read it, you find out what is the compliance, you find checklist, you find diagrams, you find flowcharts to understand. And when you look at certain, like for example with POSH, the additional aspect is how to do inquiries, right? So when you look at it, you figure out how to do inquiries, what are those important guidelines that we need to remember when we're doing inquiries as well.
Right, right. And I believe, especially from Neha ma'am's perspective, leading a team in in-house and obviously being a part of it, and you also have a lot of interaction with the managerial part of your company as well. Does this sort of a guideline available in one stop portal, that is your book, obviously, does it come in handy for any professional who's out there who's trying to inculcate this kind of an information available?
Absolutely. So if you're trying to set out policies in your organization, HR policies, this book is very relevant. If you are trying to check your compliance levels internally, this book is relevant. If you have ICC proceedings, any sort of ICC proceedings that you need, we have enough guidelines on how to conduct them at every stage. How to investigate, how to how do you conduct the hearings, and then final, how do you give out your reports. We've covered all of that. So this is very relevant for an in-house lawyer as well, and other HR professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was that when we were even writing the manuscript of it, we made sure that we ran it through several HR professionals in our network, because the intent was to have them as the audience as well. So for two lawyers to write the book and just make sure that it was also relevant for people who are non-lawyers, so we made sure that we ran certain contents of the book through several HR professionals, took their comments, took their feedback as to what did they want, like if they were looking for a book like this, what is it that they would have wanted. So simple things that we got to learn was breaking down the language. Like, they all said don't put legalese because that's not something that we are comfortable with, right? Like, what is the point? Otherwise we'll still have to consult our legal teams eventually.
Yeah.
So these are certain things that we learned from them, that break down the language, don't put too many, like, don't refer to sections so much, like, because you're already doing that once, and like coming to like breaking down that's not okay, that's not like something which is relevant. So that was very helpful. Like
Right.
those feedback were very helpful for us, and we got a good feedback in general also. Now that the book has been published, it has been 7 months, from the general legal fraternity and people who have brought the book. We've gotten we've heard like it's been something that has been helpful. So it's a
Right.
good vindication also. Like it's a good way of doing that file. Like, we could break it down to the point.
Wonderful. I think lawyers trying to make their make things relevant for the non-lawyer people has been the struggle of the legal fraternity ever since. But I think with this project, what has become very important, something that I realized was that I think this is one of a kind book which is actually working on the labor codes, because I don't think there is any other project that has come out which takes into consideration of that. Now, although I won't expect you to go totally in detail, because again, spoiler alert, I would suggest everyone please buy this book and go through everything that is included in that. But could you please tell me what are the various codes and what are the various provisions, various sections that have been taken into account while sort of creating coalition of this labor codes and bringing all those various other acts that were being considered as a part of this project for this book? Isha ma'am, we can start with you.
Okay, all right. So if you look at the book structure, we have divided the book into 5 parts. Okay, so part one of the book contains your prevention of sexual harassment of women at workplace, Act of 2013, and so I'll just go through the different parts first. And so basically that's part one. Part two is your social security code vis-a-vis the maternity benefits covered under the code. Third part of it is equal remuneration under code on wages. Fourth part is your safety provisions and welfare provisions under the occupational safety code of 2020. And the fifth part of it is state specific shops and establishment act, because shops and establishment act itself is a statewide, it's a state specific law. So there are different and many of them, and literally each and every state has it. However, what we did was we picked 15 of them. We've picked 15 top states, like when and keeping in mind the fact that this is where majority this I mean these are the laws, these were the state specific laws which were going through a lot of unchange also. So just to point this out, in 2016 the union government took out a model shops and establishment legislation, which was a model which was to be followed by each and every state. They were given the discretion of this because it included provisions for how to allow or what to do in the workplace when you are allowing night shift for women. So previously a lot of laws, and still like certain states, nighttime work for women is not available. Like workplaces are not supposed to do that, given the fact that obviously the trigger point is that you, if you can't ensure safety mechanisms. But now what has come in is that no, you have to do it, but these are xyz points that you need to follow. Like for example, give them transport, make sure that the transport mechanism is clearly defined within the organization, give them changing rooms, washrooms, etc. when they're coming at night, linking it back to the making sure that harassment and sexual harassment does not occur at night. So these are basic guidelines that have been given. So these are the 5 parts in which we divided the book. So part A, of course, POSH covers the POSH provisions, inquiry provisions, etc. As Neha had already pointed out, each section contains 2 parts. One is your breakdown of the law that needs to be complied with, and part 2 contains case laws, like judicial precedents on each and every topic, so that it is relevant for lawyers who are litigating and who are practicing. And when they are doing such cases, it's easy to refer. And because we wrote the book in 2020, we have covered all the cases till December 2020. So it's like the most updated book, if I mean arguably the most updated book as of right now on these topics with respect to judicial precedents. So yeah, so that's about it. And so that's what, so POSH covers that, maternity benefit covers your so like every code that came in as of right now, they have taken the law from which was there previously, and they have incorporated it or codified it in the code itself. So that's what we have covered in each of the section.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I think on that front, it's very interesting because for anyone who's trying to research on these laws would obviously find this book
Yeah.
very relevant. But irrespectively, for someone who's trying to understand the relevance or sort of trying to find the research methodology that has been adopted by the authors. So maybe Neha ma'am, what exactly was the research methodology that you went through? Was it like properly going through each and every legislation, filtering out the cases, or was it that you picked up the issues and then identified the laws that were applicable?
Actually, so when the new labor codes had come out, since we already had the mandate to write this book, we first went and studied the new labor codes. We had two excellent interns, Kainat and Nipuna.
Nipuna.
Yeah. So both of them with us, we sat and studied the new labor codes. We checked how it was different from the earlier legislation. Uh, we then went through precedents for each section of the earlier act. Now, since there was no case law in the new labor code, we had to rely on the precedents for the earlier legislation. And whatever we felt was relevant to our target audience, which is HR professionals and lawyers, we put in, a summary of those precedents and whatever the impact of their judgments was. So that was our research methodology for the book primarily.
Right, right, wonderful. And I think as a part of my last set of questions is obviously if someone who's using this book, especially because I would like to speak from the opinion of the from the perspective of a law student, because obviously this is a selfish endeavor, is to understand how can we make the best out of this book, especially when we are going through about it. Is there a predisposed prerequisite knowledge that we need to have about these laws, or is it that we can simply start researching on it and start using this book from head on?
No, I think you can start any law student if they are looking at understanding this area more, understanding gender laws or understanding workplace laws or employment laws, labor laws for that matter. They can pick up the book and they can start using it right away. The idea has been to make sure that if somebody, I mean, it doesn't matter, right? You don't have to have the information to start researching on the book or to start reading the book or to start figuring out what is relevant for you under the book. And they can use it everywhere. Like they can use it. I think it's like it's relevant for, like we said, it's relevant for a practitioner. It's relevant for somebody who's starting their practice in this area. It's somebody who's litigating and wanting to research on case laws, precedents that is applicable on XYZ areas of law, or just that they're writing their thesis and they want information about what is the gamut of these laws and how to consider them as well.
Wonderful.
I would just like to add one thing there.
Yes, ma'am.
If you are a law student who just wants to have an overview of the legislation, then maybe start with the FAQs, because we have tried to, put it in like very simple terms what you should definitely know in the FAQs and what are your doubts that we answer in the FAQs. Then, if you want, go to the specific sections which we have covered in the thing, and also definitely look at the precedents that we have covered there as well.
Wonderful.
So
wonderful.
that's.
I think everyone who picks up this book will find this extremely useful. There is no doubt about it. Just by looking at this book, I think while I was researching on it, I really found everything that I wanted to read about, and everything is available in this. So obviously, the link is down in the description for anyone who's watching this, and everything detailed is available as well. Before we wrap this up, I would request you please share your closing remarks for all the viewers who are watching this episode. Esha ma'am.
All right. So I think what I would just like to tell the audience, be it a law student or be it a lawyer or somebody who's practicing, is that if you are looking at working in this area, or if you are already taking up a case in this area, or like a legal situation, anything that for that matter, be it advisory or be it litigation side or be it research side for that matter, if you are interested in work in understanding women related workplace laws applicable in this country as of right now, this is your go to book. This is where you go and you will figure out all the details that you need to start your journey in this area, especially even as a practitioner. If you want to understand that how do I start, what do I start practicing in, if I want to be a gender law specialist, then you can start taking up this book and you can start researching on it and start building up your practice from there. So that's what I would say to everybody here.
Wonderful. Neha,
I
ma'am.
would also like to add that to what Esha said, that if you also need assistance with trainings or any advisory for ICC related, your ICCs in your organization, our email IDs would be something that Costa will share. Please reach out to us. We will definitely assist you with that. Also, at this point, I really want to thank Costa. I think his podcast is, I mean, you've given us a platform to talk about the book. Thank you so much. I really found all the questions that you asked to be, very insightful and very well researched. Thank you so much for taking out time for this. I know that you have a full-time job and you have college to balance. So it's great that you're managing to make time to do this. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I just want to clear the air. This is a very selfish endeavor. I'm just waiting for my free copy of the book so that I can exploit that. This was all about it. But thank you so much, ma'am. I think I genuinely enjoyed this conversation, more so because now I have I think supposedly a preface to the various laws that I would love to have further conversations on, and I definitely would be reaching out to you, both of you, and troubling you more and more, because I would be picking up each and every laws and sort of having conversations on them, in-depth conversations on each and every code that is coming out. But meanwhile, thank you so much, ma'am, for joining me, and I had a wonderful time. I hope you had a good time too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.